All right, I think we'll get started. And I think we have first on our list, we have a presentation from Homeward.
No intros,
No
other than
intros?
hopefully everyone knows Angie.
But yeah, we'll let Angie get going. But I just wanted to thank her for being here. There's been a lot of discussion about the homeless population in Des Moines and how we serve them and how we can better serve them. And one of the things, if we as a council want to better understand the landscape and what is going on, it's pretty critical. Homeward is central to all of that. So I'm glad Angie is here and look forward to hearing what she has to say.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you and share a little bit about our organization, as well as provide some updates about things that are happening within our community. As Josh said, my name is Angie Arthur. I'm Executive Director of Homeward, and we are the regional planning organization for homelessness in Polk County. And within that, we're working to create strategic partnerships to end homelessness. And we do that by working with a variety of individuals. And we'll start with the first slide. I'll remember to do that from now on. Obviously, homeless organizations that we partner with, as well as community partners, various other service providers that maybe not specialize in homelessness, but serve the homeless populations, our government officials, as well as individuals that are experiencing homelessness. Through these partnerships, we're working together to look at the overall efficiency and effectiveness of our system, understanding that we have very limited resources, and the best way to work together is so that we can collaborate and evolve to meet the needs of the community members. With that overall vision that one day that everyone in Polk County has a safe place to call home. That is our overall vision of one of the things that we want to have for our community. There are a lot of homeless experts within the overall community that are doing great work on a daily basis. And what we're able to do as an organization is to look at a system-wide approach, to look at all those different pieces that we have within the community. What are the gaps that we have within the community? What are the benefits that we have, the resources that we're currently in place? What's best for our community as we look and have those discussions and conversations with folks that are receiving the services, the partners that are providing their services, looking at those overall leading innovations and solutions. What can we do to better serve the folks to meet the needs of homelessness in Polk County? We do that for a variety of ways. We talk about and disseminate best practices. We look at community standards, what the expectation is if you're providing a rapid rehousing program. These are the basic guidelines of what we need you to do to meet that, to best serve our community members, as well as funding allocations and looking at other funding opportunities for us in a community. And then one important thing that we do is disseminate information. We have a homeless management information system that our service providers, even though they're from different organizations, put their input and data into. And that's a very important tool for us that we have in our community so that we can look at data to help drive our decisions, as well as looking at what the trends are within our community and other type of resources, helping us to better understand what is happening within the work that we do. Why do we exist? Part of it has to do with legislation. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, has a mandate, and I've included, if you love to get into federal registries, I've put the site there for you to look at some of the specifics there. But it exists to create our community response to homelessness. So there's specific guidelines and expectations about what our community needs to have in place to be able to make that work, and also what we need to have in place to receive funding for our community. And again, overall goal is to work to end homelessness and what we can do to provide those different funding opportunities for our service providers within the community. We are not a direct service provider, so that allows us to step back and look at those systemic, holistic approaches. What are some of those changes that we need in our system? What are some barriers that we can look at and reduce? What are some things as an organization that we can do to help support our service providers? So again, we're looking at that overall arching viewpoint of what we have going on in our community from a homeless system perspective and moving that forward. again, there's that goal that we want to have a safe place to call home. And that is important, but we want that so that our community members that are experiencing homelessness can thrive. We want them to be able to focus on their health, their well-being, again, attend school or work, whatever that might be for those individuals. But we know that if we don't have that stability of housing for individuals and for households, that is a challenge for them, and they have more barriers that they're experiencing. Higher incidence of physical health issues, mental health, stress, trauma, variety of those different things. So those are some of the aspects. To get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts, Homeward has a board of directors. There's 23 current members. We have up to 25 members. Those are made up of various partners within the community. Again, the Federal Registry has some guidelines that encourages us and who's going to be on that board. We have service providers that are providing homeless service resources. We have employers within the community, representation from education from the Des Moines Public School Districts, as well as various other entities. We have representations from the police department, as well as a variety of folks that now, of course, I can't think of all the other categories of what they are. But again, we have wide representation, wanting to make sure that we have good input, as well as including some folks with lived experience and participation on that. There are several folks from the city of Des Moines that also participate. Lisa Krabs is one of the members here that's on our board, as well as Manisha Padel, Lorna Garcia, and Rebecca Foster from Municipal Housing Agency. So again, we want to have a good representation of folks. We have individuals from the county also that are serving on the board.
There's no election.
No, I was going through to make sure that I'm not aware of that. If it would be a smaller role in the community.
Angie, how big is your staff, or your full-time or paid staff?
We just added a third person, so we're up to 3 folks. So we're a small staff.
Okay.
And there's a lot of expectations on the different roles that we have.
And the funding for your staff comes from?
From 3 primary places. We receive funding from HUD Planning Grant. That is out as in the overall process. It's a regular thing throughout the community. We have funding from the city of Des Moines, and we have funding from Polk County. Those are the 3 larger primary ones. We also do applications with local foundations, so we have funding that we've received local foundations as well.
And do any of the suburban communities contribute funding?
Not at this time.
Not at this time. Thank you.
Missed this when I was reading. What do Josh and Indira say? What's
Homeless Coordinating Council. And I'll be speaking to that in a few more slides down the road, but
Okay.
to get into
so
a little
that's
more
different. There's Homeward, and then there's this other committee.
Exactly. So one of the things that we've done as a community, and we actually did this in 2019, was to have some strategic conversation and discussion. When I first came to the role, I knew what I thought was important for the community in the homeless system, but I didn't know what the community felt. And so we did strategic work, looked at what are some of those foundational beliefs that we feel are so important that they need to go through all the work that we do within the continuum of care, through our collaboration, through our partnerships, through the work that Homeward does specifically, but also through what the services providers do as well. And within that, we identified 3 primary foundational beliefs. One is community collaboration. It's very obvious that we can't do the work in our silos, that we need to work together and make sure that what we're moving forward is best for the community and also is supported overall within the community. We also discussed racial equity and the need for the resources and the services that we provide not to cause further inequity, not to cause disparity, and what can we do to address that. So a brief example of what that might look like is we have a tool called a vulnerability index review. And so when you're coming into the system, we want to make sure we're serving the most vulnerable individuals. So if we're looking at the vulnerability of your likelihood to die on the streets, And so what does that look like? The higher score you have, the more vulnerable an individual. We looked at the tool and did some assessments from statistical analysis, chi-squares and p-values. So we're talking very deep dive and having that conversation and look, and saw that there were a couple questions that actually caused inequity. There's some that just reflected what was in the community. But we looked at that, looked at the questions. Look, we're able to put in a different version. We're able to add some additional assessment questions so that we could help remove some of that inequity in the work that we do. So that's an example of what racial equity and why that's so important. And then the other thing the community felt was important to have is housing first. And I know you've had some conversations regarding that in your previous discussions and discussions with other service providers. But I also wanted to include with you some of those elements of what is included in housing first. And overall, we want to remove the barriers that people experience to go moving into housing. So what does that look like? Immediate access to permanent housing. So it means you don't have to be housing ready. You don't need an ID. You don't need a clean corrections record. You don't need to have a job. It doesn't mean that we're not going to work towards supporting you to those different forms of incomes, right, once you get there, but it's important to get you housed. Example I used is if you are a person that's diabetic, if you don't have a refrigerator to put your insulin in, like that is a health issue and a challenge. So it's best to get you housed first so that we can support you and surround you with services. So again, we want to support customer choice and self-determination, because just because we have a resource that may not be the specific right resource for you and your household, we want to make sure that we have some of that self-determination, recovery orientation, and supporting folks as they recover and what their specific goals are. The next element, again, is also talking about client-driven supports. So we talk about moving folks into housing, but it's also important to support people with those supportive services so that they can be successful and continue to be housed. So again, that's one of those other elements. And the fifth element that we talk about, and maybe not as well known, but if you think about it, we want you to be connected from a social and community integration aspect. So it's important that you have those supports from a community aspect and connected. So again, all those are important pieces of housing first that we want to move forward within the community. So a little more of the nuts and bolts that we've asked. One of the questions kind of just segued into this is we do have 3 staff members, so there's a lot of work for 3 small staff members, or 3 staff members, a small number of folks. So a lot of the work that we do is we need to rely on the committee structure that we have to achieve our goals. And those committee structures, our memberships are made up of our community partners, of government officials, homeless organizations, again, people that are experiencing homelessness. And so just giving you a list of some of the committees that you have. One that you might be more familiar with because you see the product of their work a couple times this year already is the grant committee. And they're made up of individuals within our committee, some that have foundation expertise in work, representation from the city. Lisa also sits on that committee as well. And we, of course, look at the allocation of funds and vote on those and move those forward. Have some of the basic structures as well for homeward and the continuum of care. One of the titles that you might hear us call is a continuum of care lead, and that's more of a HUD term within that. So just to kind of let you know that that's part of our role within the community. We have finance committee, coordinated services that talks about policies and standards and practices. So again, some of those nitty-gritty detailed things, as well as you see we have racial equity and communication. And also as we're looking at collaboration, we'll have a shared committee with 2 other organizations in town regarding housing, because we felt it was important to not duplicate those committee members and meetings to move that forward. So again, it just gives you a little bit more information from that. So allocation of funds, just to talk a little bit about what we touched on before. There's funding that comes into our community through HUD. And one is the continuum of care funding. That's about the $4.6 million of funding that comes in on an annual basis. They kindly issue like 90 pages of instructions on an annual basis of how we move forward the process and how the scoring and things are to move forward and happen. And so with that, there's different things that it funds. one of those things, or several of those things you see listed up here, but centralized intake, homeless management information system, the planning grant to help us move forward with the work that we're doing, rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, supportive services only. So again, those are the kind of resources that come into our community that we partner with. We go through that allocation process, vote on it, and move that forward. Then there's some funding that comes into and actually granted to the city of Des Moines for Emergency Solutions Grant, but in the legislation and the requirements it talks about partnering with the continuum of care. And so we've partnered with the city in doing the RFP process for the Emergency Solutions Grant. So you'll see that it funds a few of the same items of centralized intake, homeless management information system, and rapid rehousing, but then the funds are also used for shelters, for street outreach, and for homeless prevention. So it's important that we have those variety of services, but also just wanted to let you know that the different resources don't always fund the same type of needs within our community. All of those are important resources for us to use well. Also wanted to let you know that when an organization receives the funds or is contracted and granted, they do receive those dollars, but there is an expectation from the federal government that those organizations provide additional funds to that. So for example, the continuum of care funding, if you receive $100, you're required to match 25%. So you need to match additional $25. It's a bit steep, more steep for the Emergency Solutions Grant because they require 100% match. So if you get $100, you need to find funding to match that for $100. So again, just to give you a little bit of the nuts and bolts and nitty-gritties of what we have going on, but again, just wanted to let you know that process. Again, a little bit more of that structure and how it interacts with the City Council here. Again, we talked about the grant committee doing the review and the scoring, and the board then reviews and approves those allocations. And then you, as the City of Des Moines, are our collaborative applicant, the entity that actually submits that application into the federal government. And because of that role, you have that aspect of the responsibility to be able to vote to approve that overall grant. So when votes come in to you as a city council, that's asking you to the approval of submitting that application. So again, just wanted to.
Angie, does that apply just to the ESG funding, or does it also apply to the continuum of care funding?
It applies to both.
Okay.
You are the applicant for the collaborative applicant in general. And so even when we had the new source of funding that was brought forward to this group last month for the unsheltered application, that would also be there. There's a possibility of some other grants coming up this next year. We don't know what they are. Just in some conversations with a representative from the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, they were talking about some possibilities, but didn't know specifically. They did not share specifically what it is. So we could be looking at some other opportunities for our community, but again, that would be a community decision and discussion that we would have from Homeward Board and community member discussion and representatives from service providers to make sure that that would be something we'd want to do and move forward. The Homeless Coordinating Council is one of the questions that you asked about, is comprised of local elected officials. So this is a little bit different in the aspect of compared to the Homeward Board. Homeward is also should have said a 501c3 organization, so we're an independent nonprofit as well. Homeless Coordinating Council, again, is comprised of local elected officials from a majority of our suburban and Des Moines, City of Des Moines as well, communities, and also have community partners. There's representation from the Community Foundation as well as United Way of Central Iowa that sits on. This board has been in existence for a while, and we've done a reshuffle to be able to add those additional suburban communities because we felt it was important to make sure that we have conversations and provide education for all the community because we know homelessness is everywhere in Polk County, and so we need to reinforce that with those conversations that we're having. So we're taking this group as an opportunity to learn about homelessness in Polk County, what it looks like, what are the available resources that we have. again, we're talking and asking those individuals to bring back this information to their communities to share that and educate their other community members and their fellow elected officials within the work that they're doing. And again, asking for input for different entities, of different pieces of information that we share, of what's going on, share information comparable to this group about point in time, other information that we have about what's happening within the community. And then we're asking about what are those needs of community resources that can be addressed? What does that look like? Having those kind of discussion. We meet quarterly. And again, we talked about we're focused on collaboration across the county. So that's why we have other suburban community members in there for that representation, and is staffed by Homeward as well. So those are some pieces there.
Angie, I'm just a little confused. So when you say we, now you're talking about the coordinating council as opposed to
Sorry.
Homeward. So does Homeward provide any services or help for the suburban communities?
Not directly in, like, we will have conversations with them. We'll present to their committees or their councils to share information and things along that line comparable to what we do here. But I'm not sure if there's other services that you're asking about.
Well,
They don't do the services.
Right.
Okay.
We're not a direct service provider. What we're doing is planning. So of course we will have conversations about them if we want to have conversations about their needs within their community, that we would help them with from a planning perspective as well.
so you're helping them with planning even though they're not contributing. Do I have that correct?
That's correct.
I think the planning is a region-wide, because it's Polk County as well as City of Des Moines. So it's like a region-wide planning effort.
Yes.
Is that correct, Angie?
Yes, because the continuum of care and the funding that we get from the federal government, I mean, we are serving Polk County as an overall entity.
Right. So basically, you're not individually planning for every community.
Right.
It doesn't have a plan.
Right.
They're just relying on Polk County.
So,
plan.
right. And so, for example, like the city of West Des Moines, we've helped them in some of their consolidation, right? Because that's also part of the expectation of the HUD guidelines, is that we support those communities that are required to do the fair housing planning and things along that line. That is part of our role as well as requirement.
More through the housing, but not necessarily through rapid rehousing.
Well, and yes, and part of that plan addresses homelessness.
Right.
So that's
Okay.
where we come into that work.
What I'm hearing is that City of Des Moines taxpayers are paying for part of this, are paying for this, but part of that funding is going out to the suburbs. So is that...
Polk County is also paying us dollars.
They're also paying, but
Yes.
is it kept separate? So Polk County dollars and Des Moines dollars? No?
No, but I would
It's not
say
segregated.
a large portion of our work is in Des Moines.
Yeah,
Right. And just to clarify, Homeward is the planning organization.
Yes.
correct.
There are three primary funders. So the planning grant, which is
HUD dollars.
HUD dollars and has its own set of requirements.
Right.
There is county dollars and there's City of Des Moines dollars.
Right.
So those
As
are
well
the,
as other foundations that we apply for.
and that covers 3 employees.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And Angie, if I could, some of those nonprofits with Homeward do have presence out in the suburbs, right?
Correct.
So I think that's important to recognize as well.
That's it. Again, what we're wanting to achieve with the Homeless Council is connecting more with communities overall, and the leaders in the communities to have those conversations about homelessness, be able to talk about what kind of information we have to share. We've shared municipality-specific information about their gaps in affordable housing and the needs that they have to help support them. I know we're talking about homelessness, but lack of affordable housing is one of the lead causes of homelessness. So they go hand in hand, and it's important that we have those conversations. Again, we wanted to create a space to regular updates for them about what's happening within the system and the resources that we have overall within the community. with the HCC, we've had the work group, the extreme weather work group, which came about regarding a request from this body here, and looking at how we can better serve the community members that are experiencing unsheltered homelessness within the community. We've also put together and received funding from various sources to create a unsheltered study within that in partnership with Drake University. So those are a few of the key pieces that have come out of the Homeless Coordinating Council and the work that we're doing there. I'm going to transition now to more of from what Homeward is and does to more of what is happening within the community, and wanted to provide some demographic information regarding racial and ethnicity. And what you can see there is that 35% of the individuals that we serve throughout the overall homeless system, so we're talking full spectrum of resources that are happening in the homeless system, 35% are Black. As compared to, that's a huge overrepresentation as compared to the 2020 census, where almost 8% of individuals within Polk County are Black. So the folks that we're serving, there's an overrepresentation. There's a higher level of need. You're seeing, again, some more, as you look at the numbers, it's 55% white, 35% Black African American. These are also terms used by HUD as well. So that's the definitions that we're defining for race and ethnicity. 8% of people are 2 or more races, 1% American Indian, Native American, 0.7% Asian, and 0.3% Native Hawaiian Pacific Island. We see a bit of overrepresentation as well with our Latinx population of 11% of clients served as compared to 9% of the Latino population within. Letting to know who we're serving within the community and then the needs that we have there. Talked a little bit about this before, about why we have homelessness in our county. I think it's a myriad of reasons, right? There's several systemic and societal barriers that are providing challenges. Again, the lack of affordable and accessible housing, that's one of the biggest issues that we have. I think not just in Polk County, but across the state. I think that's a challenge and a barrier. Again, when we have folks with high barriers, there's financial, mental, cognitive, behavioral, and other physical challenges that they experience, as well as racial discrimination, domestic violence. All those issues have impact for us. One thing to note, we talk about a lack of affordable and appropriate housing. This is some numbers that came from the National Coalition for Low-Income Housing, is that just fairly recently released, for every 100 households of extremely low income, so 30% of area median income and below. So for every household that are looking for housing, there are 23 housing units available in Polk. So that lets you know that there's a significant gap of housing in that area. You'll see it shrinks as incomes increase, and then when you get higher income, there's actually a surplus of housing. Happy to provide more detail or information on that, and more information if that is of interest for this group. Unfortunately, we're not able to get that by community level, but we can get that by.
Angie, would you say that we've seen reentry from incarceration as a reason for homelessness, or I guess maybe as a reason for homelessness or a displacement, new development going in areas? Does that increase homelessness or does that just displace people? Either of those two reasons?
Sure, and yes, I think both of those, when people are reentering from the correctional system, if that's on your background, that can be a barrier for landlords, and that is you need to know who might be in the community that would be willing to support that, and sometimes that is a challenge, particularly depending on what the charge might be. And as we develop more green space, we're seeing folks move that maybe were unhoused and unsheltered and camping there, and so yes, both of those things will have affected homelessness within our community.
Thank you.
Wanted to provide you some numbers about what the current need is in our community and what we're seeing from that perspective. These are some numbers that probably, ebb and flow, might have changed a little bit, but not significantly since we put this report together. There are currently 521 households that are experiencing homelessness that are on the wait list for housing support. So that's a significant number of households, and that's not individuals, but households. It could be singles or families in that number. So we just don't have those housing supports in our community to provide them those resources. Right now, or when I asked the question, we have 76 families that are on the wait list for emergency shelter. That is higher than we've seen since before the pandemic. There was a couple times during the pandemic we were down to single digits, but now it's increased again. So that's a challenge. Doesn't necessarily mean that these folks are living unsheltered. They could be doubled up, but again, that's not stability of housing for folks. Or could be living in their car, could be living in a motel. Like there's a variety of things. I think what we're also seeing is
And Angie, just for clarification, you're pulling this from the HMIS system?
the HMIS system and also working with centralized intake at primary healthcare to provide those numbers.
Right. So there's a chance that if there's an organization that doesn't work with HMIS, that there could be some folks who are not in the system. But this should capture most of our providers, because most of our providers work with HMIS and centralized intake.
Yes, exactly. There's very few exceptions we have when you look at from the shelter perspective. We're doing some data work with Hope Ministries, and we should be at 100% from the shelter perspective very soon. So that's important for us from a data knowledge perspective and adding information into our system to best understand what's happening. One of the challenges that we're seeing right now is in the rental market. It's been very difficult for rental to connect with affordable apartments or just apartments in general to find that appropriate housing. Even when we have resources of permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing dollars to go to them, even when we guaranteed for a period of time that you will have payment for that rent, that's becoming a challenge for us in the community. And, as we know, as cold weather quickly approaches us, we want to be able, it's urgent to support families and individuals that are looking for shelter from that perspective.
Why do you think you have the resources that you're not able to use?
I think a variety of things. One thing I'll mention later, but we'll mention it now. We're seeing in the area naturally occurring affordable housing being purchased by out-of-state investors. And so they're coming in, and I can think of about 1 week we lost like almost 500 units. And they're coming in, and they're having people move out, and they may or may not remodel, and then increasing rent. So that
Increase the rent?
Yeah, increasing the rent. So that's a challenge. I think with the pandemic, there's several of our small landlords that have transitioned into property management companies. And lots of times larger property management companies don't always have flexibility and interest in working with organizations as well that have some of those supports. I think also having the legislation in place that the state approved regarding income also has, legal source of income also has an impact as well. So there's a variety of reasons within that. And what you're seeing built is not low-income housing. It is higher-end housing. And so I think that's a challenge as well. Also, there's availability perspective. Go ahead.
Just sort of a follow-up. When you talk low income, a lot of times we may focus on 80% AMI. I assume you're talking
30%.
Like that's an important clarification, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the folks who are homeless and are most vulnerable, we're talking about the lowest level of affordability.
Right.
And when we talk at the council table, oftentimes, we're talking 80%, even affordable projects, like we get down to 60. Very rarely do we get units in that 30 to 40% of AMI.
And I'm glad you mentioned 40% because I would say up to 40% is going to have a significant impact for the extremely low population.
I always get concerned that we always talk 40, 30, in reality to people to understand what does that mean for a family of four? What would you make if you considered 30% AMI? I think sometimes people, when you hear that number, it's much more tangible to what people are facing. So 30%, what's that mean?
I don't have the exact numbers because it does.
Yeah, I
vary
wondered
by
if they've
family
updated.
size.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm happy to share that information.
I just think
with you.
we always, in every agency I've ever, United Way, we all talk about the numbers, but for people to understand what that means for people out there, is it, a family of four, 24,000? Is it a family? I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I think it helps put in perspective the problems people are facing based on the incomes you can earn in today.
Exactly.
I just pulled up the 2021 numbers from HUD, and it said for Des Moines, it's between it's like 19,200 for one person, goes up to about 36 for 8 people. So it's in between that range, 36,000.
Yeah, I just think it helps to put it in perspective as to actually what this means for people that are.
Good point.
Angie, so I just wanted to point out or clarify. There's 76 families with children on the wait list for emergency shelter, so we don't have sufficient emergency shelter in place for families right now.
We currently have 3 emergency shelters and they're full at this time.
Okay. And then we are discussing today, we're going to be discussing changing our payment standard for the new year down from 107, which we just set a few months ago, to 100%. Would that change affect, we're talking about challenges in the rental market, would going back down to 100% payment standard for Section 8, would that sort of exacerbate this problem, or would it have an effect?
I'm sure that it would have an effect. To the degree, I can't speak to what that is, but it would give a little bit less flexibility from that perspective. And I know there are balances, right, on the reasons on why you want to do that or move that forward. It likely would have some effect.
Okay, thank you.
We're going from 93% back up to 100%.
I thought we were at 107.
No, that's allowed, but, well,
No. If you look at the number, if we go back and review the blue letter, our payment level is not at 100% of the market rate.
Gotcha. So we're going up.
We're going up, not down.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Okay. That would be a better effect. Yes.
So then the opposite of what you said. Okay, great.
Yeah. Right. Just a couple numbers behind the need here. To let you know, number of people being served. We have centralized intake is that process that we have in the community. It's administered by primary health care, and that's how folks enter in the homeless system and be able to be referred to housing supports and services and other resources. So to look at the numbers that we have, there was about 1,744 households that completed that intake in 2020.
Just, again, I wanted to just stop from an implication perspective. So understanding if an organization is not participating in the homeless HMIS and the centralized intake process,
Right.
they're not able to help connect folks to resources outside of their organization.
They can make referrals, but when we have those conversations and have by name list meetings where we're trying to meet and support individuals, they would not be able to participate because you don't have release of information to be able to have those conversations.
Right, you wouldn't know about that. So whereas anyone else that is within the system, like if someone at CIS is entered into the system and then there are conversations, or there's another organization that's like, oh, we've got an opening here for someone with this type of need, that allows that identification of need and matching. Is that an oversimplified?
We have, as long as they approve access to that information, right? That's personal choice, right, on whether to share your information. But it would be within the system to be able to have case notes and access from that perspective.
yeah, there's really two aspects to that. There's the software, and then there's the business partner arrangements that allow for HIPAA-type
Conversation.
information to be shared.
Exactly.
So, Josh, what organizations, you referred to it a couple times, I'm just kind of wondering, do you have an example of some organizations that don't participate in these numbers? Okay,
Participate. That's the primary one.
okay.
And why would they not participate? Any reason?
It would be the choice of the organization.
But they could participate.
Sure. They have in the past.
They have.
I just thought it was, you referred to it a couple times. It'd be best that the folks at home, the folks in the audience would understand what we're talking about.
So with this chart, we'll go back real quick because I know I'm running out of my time here. Just to let you know, we're seeing an increase of numbers of people that are going through the centralized intake process. Again, that's that vulnerability assessment and letting us know what kind of needs folks have and referrals being made from that system. So you can see we're on track this year to probably have comparable numbers, not surpass the number that we had last year. One of the things that I think it's important for us to know, it's not just the number of people in need that it's increasing, it's also their needs are increasing, the level of barriers they're experiencing are increasing. So that's what this chart shows. In 2020, 38% of the people that completed that vulnerability assessment scored higher levels of vulnerability, meaning that they would be eligible for the most and the highest level of services and supports that we can give within the community. So that means there's more barriers, there's higher barriers due to health, due to mental health, due to disability, due to violence, substance use, correctional history, whatever that might be, eviction history, whatever that might be, that's vulnerability. In 2021, we saw that number go up to 47%, and the first 9 months of this year, we saw it increase to over 54%. So that's a significant change in the number of folks, the number of households, I should say, that are experiencing higher barriers.
But Angie,
Mhm.
I mean, those are a lot of different things.
Right?
Homeward isn't able to address all of these or any of these really, or do you work on, the substance abuse and the I mean, how do you address these and how do you provide services for in particular that
So
category?
I think that's where that collaboration comes in and has conversations. We've had conversations with substance use service providers a few months ago regarding what's available in the community. There's different resources that we can do. I think that allows us some opportunities for advocacy on different things along the line. Eviction expungement is one of those things that is, when you have an eviction filing, not even if you have a dismissal or even if it was done in error, that stays on your record and shows on iowacourts.com. So even if it was an error, so for example, I'm aware of a lawyer in town that was representing someone in a rental case, and the landlord put their name, the lawyer's name, on the case. So now the lawyer who was representing someone has an eviction filing on their history, and there's no way for them to get that off. So those are some of those advocacy things that we could do in partnership that can address some of those different barriers.
But you don't have any direct resources going
No.
towards any of the categories, right? Or
No.
They're to be overseen.
Yeah.
Well, I
We've
would
already
say that
coordinated.
The resources are through the Continuum of Care grant and
Right.
the Emergency Solutions grant. And some of those, so one of the biggest sources, I mean, we have permanent supportive housing and work with a partner. Our permanent supportive housing are dealing with that full range of issues. And, one of the things I think this data helps illustrate, previously, we could serve more people just by helping identify housing and affordable housing that they needed. What we're seeing with this is more people need services to go along with that housing because they have mental health or...
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
point of asking the question. Is
Right.
How are we addressing? How is Homeward addressing? I don't know, Scott.
Angie, you
There's-
pointed out earlier that you guys are created because of a federal requirement for being able to get funding from the federal government to go into our community partner organizations. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we need Homeward to be doing the strategic planning, to be collecting this data so that we are aware of these problems, and then to be funneling the funding into our community partner organizations who are addressing the needs.
Well, yeah. And
It's to bring people
It would
together.
be helpful maybe to talk about some of the examples, to Joe's point, where we are working as a community on permanent supportive housing. I think the hotel conversion project might be a good example to
Exactly.
talk about, because that is new and that will serve.
So you're talking about the partnership with Monarch Apartments, and we're looking at that opportunity and supporting the work of that organization, putting that together, Anawim Housing, from the perspective of partnership. And what that will do is they will take referrals from centralized intake and supports in there. And so they're bringing in other partners as well from a recovery perspective, from a substance use perspective, from a mental health perspective, partner to support those individuals there. I think from the work that we do is some of those conversations and discussions. So a small example of this might be is we met just last week with ARL because we know that can be a barrier for some folks. Now they're working with some individual shelters, but we're talking from a system perspective. What is that system perspective so that all the shelters in the community or some of the housing programs can work with them when animal placement is needed to be able to support someone from that work. So those are the kind of conversations that we're going to have from that perspective. We've had some conversations with Broadlawns about the needs in our community and what that looks like. And it's not just us in that room, right? It's other service providers having those conversations as well so that we can do some better planning on what that looks like.
And just to clarify, on the Monarch apartment, that how many new units will that be if that?
I believe there's 42 new units from that perspective. And so that will offer us, again, one of the things, the challenges is it's not just one solution, there's many solutions for us in the community. And our permanent supportive housing has been scattered site in the past or currently, and this will provide us an opportunity to have a community setting for permanent supportive housing, which is a better solution for some folks in our community. So that's important to be able to have those variety of options.
Angie, I think it's 42 units total, 2 for staff, so actually
that's true.
40 for the
Thank you for that clarification.
currently homeless, yeah.
And so I can just make sure everyone's understanding that the continuum of care funds are going to supportive housing partners, the nonprofits, who are then oftentimes subcontracting for these specific needs. And so the funds are flowing through to those types of services. It's just layered. Does that make sense?
Angie, I did want to ask on that previous slide, do you know what the causes for increase in barriers are? Because it seems pretty significant jump from 2020 to now.
Well, I think there's a variety of reasons. Do I have an actual causal study to know that? But I think there's a variety of things, COVID-19 and the impact from that. I think we're seeing more, the kind of moving on to that next slide as well, more COVID resources have ended. And so there's less resources in the community to address those things. Inflation as well as rising rents are causing challenges. It's a myriad of reasons for that perspective. One number to kind of give you an idea of some challenges. If you are an individual on disability, the basic payment is $841 a month. The fair market rent as determined by HUD for Polk County in our community is $889. So you might be paying more for your rent than you're going to get for disability. So that just shows you a gap in the resources and services. Even if you would find some place where you can do 30% of your income, that leaves you with less than $600 a month to be able to, if you're receiving disability payment of that amount, to be able to have food, medicine, whatever else you need within those resources. So again, that lack of affordable, accessible housing. I talked about the properties being sold to other investment companies. So we're, again, doing things to be able to make efforts within our community, the HUD funding that we get on an annual basis, the application for the $4.4 million for the unsheltered homelessness work. We received funding for youth homelessness demonstration programs and completed our 2-year grant with that, and now it's going to roll into approximately $900,000 annually that we're getting to serve youth between the ages of primarily between the ages of 18 and 25. We're partnering with Des Moines Municipal Housing Agencies as the City of Des Moines and primary health care to administer housing vouchers. We have Main Street vouchers for individuals with disabilities, emergency housing vouchers for folks that are experiencing homelessness. So again, trying to connect with those different partners to look at systemic changes and things that we can need to do. So again, we know we can make an impact if we have the appropriate level of services within here. We've seen it happen with veterans within our community and having functional zero and meeting those 4 measures that are needed to do that. We've been successful of that since 2016. Youth homelessness funding came into our community. We added 35 new housing units for that, specific to that, and had 0 youth that were unsheltered during the winter session. So again, that worked there. So there's different ways to advocate for federal dollars, and I would say state dollars, to support affordable housing and homelessness services. We're going to build a plan around our unsheltered study to look at ways we can eliminate barriers for shelter and housing, knowing we can't eliminate every barrier, but if we can eliminate some significant ones, that would be important. Again, lack of affordable housing. How do we partner and look at other opportunities and funding and creative solutions? And then legislative for advocacy and systematic changes. I talked about the eviction expungement. There's some tenant right things, as well as other supports for youth and family. Those are all things that we can look at.
We just found out recently, like Friday, that possibly we're going to send back dollars to the
Yes.
federal government for rental assistance.
Yeah.
So based on what I'm seeing, we are not.
The state of
The
Iowa.
state of Iowa is, correct that. The state of Iowa is going to send back, so based on this report, it looks like it's something that's very much needed because it's rising instead of going down
Yes.
because the costs,
Yes.
there'll be more evictions, which means there'll be more homeless. So hopefully they reconsider. Because it sounds like it's much needed.
It is much needed.
It's too late.
I think Friday was the deadline. And
It
so
was?
So what can happen is though Polk County and the City of Des Moines, who's worked together for this funding for emergency rental assistance, can request additional funds. And they are. So just whether that,
You would have to go directly to the federal government.
yes.
And would it be, can you ask for the same amount?
I think you can
Ask for whatever you want. Okay.
So our next steps as a partner in this sort of large coalition, kind of what you've outlined is looking at those barriers that exist, looking at how we can eliminate those barriers. And then the big one really would be that lack of affordable housing. I like that you put in long-term innovative solutions. So that can be a goal for us to be looking for those solutions to increase affordable housing in our community.
I think it's part of our work is to look at those options and solutions and look at those innovations that can be beneficial for our community, for both.
Going to reapply for those federal funds?
I think it's a joint partnership. Yeah.
Is it joint or is it the county?
No, it's Des Moines, Inn, I think.
It's
Primarily county, but
But it is the county,
It would likely be the
so it's countywide.
But we went through impact with that previously, and impact was very efficient in getting dollars out the door. Sort of a model for what could be done to get assistance to people effectively.
And understand that part of those funds can go to creating new units for new construction. I think it's like 25%.
25%
So
needs for
it's,
affordable housing.
yeah, it's a dual impact. Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
All right, I think our next item on our agenda is a report titled Pavement Condition. I believe
Yes, Jonathan, I believe, is here to present. We thought it had been a while since we had talked about pavement management.
You talked about potholes?
And, well, that's part of it. But there are all kinds of aspects of pavement management that need to occur. And so I asked Jonathan to give an update.
Morning, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Jonathan Gano, Public Works Director. To borrow a phrase from Monty Python now for something completely different. So we have 2,200 miles of roadway in the city of Des Moines that are in our care. It is one of the few pieces of city services that is accessed by almost everybody every single day, and even those that don't rely on it for the delivery of goods and services. So it's something that is literally the top of everybody's mind as soon as they pull down the driveway. We aim to make that experience as smooth and safe and reliable for everybody so that they can get to work, school without having to think about or worry about what's the road going to do to my car, can I get to where I want to be. But 2,200 miles is a lot of stuff. It would take you, if you laid it out, end to end to Juneau, Alaska, and a little bit beyond. I don't know if Juneau has suburbs, but it would get you there. The easy and obvious answer to pavement maintenance is just overlay everything. It's a wonderful tool, but it is expensive, and there is not enough money to go around. So that if you were to try to overlay by the numbers, it would be an awful lot of money, and it would take you a very long time to do just that. Even if that was, if you just had one tool in the toolkit, it would take 26 years at our current level of expenditure to mill off everything and put 2 inches of asphalt back on top of it. That's neither practical nor advisable, so we have a different way that we try to maintain pavements. We try to keep good streets in good condition by using less expensive and less invasive and less intrusive methods of maintenance along the way, because we find that when you that as a pavement ages, it declines in condition, and it is easier and cheaper to maintain good pavements in good condition, because if you spend a little bit of money at the top part of the pavement degradation curve, it will save you an awful lot of money by trying to wait until it decays in condition to the point where it needs a more expensive intervention, and that's your only choice. So we try to restore the life of pavements by intervening earlier in their life cycle, restoring their condition, and then bumping that degradation curve further out into the future. Some pavements are what you can call perpetual pavements. You can do this cycle again and again. Other pavements are not, and but that still extends and the life of the roadway system as a composite, but it lets you defer and delay more expensive rehabilitation and reconstruction into the future, even if not indefinitely. It's still a good value. In the lexicon of pavement management, there's a lot of different ways that roads fall apart and a lot of ways that you can fix them, but roughly speaking, we have problems on one side of that curve and solutions on the other. We have every single one of these tools in our toolkit except one. That's the chip seal / scrub seal option, because it breaks windshields and is a terrible mess. But everything else is in the Public Works Department's and Engineering Department's toolkits to try to achieve that life extension as we go along. We do benefit from a wonderful tool that is available to every roadway owner in the state of Iowa. The state of Iowa funds and subsidizes the data collection for what the roadway condition is in your jurisdiction. We would probably do this anyway, even without it, but it is a whale of a bargain. It's about $6,000 a year for licensing fees for the software, and then the state of Iowa furnishes the data on our roadways at no additional cost. In my former jurisdiction, this would be something we would do about once every 10 years at the cost of $250,000, and that's not even including the software. Just hiring this van, which runs every single publicly owned roadway in the state of Iowa once every 4 years, and then furnishes the data to those jurisdictions, is a tremendous bargain. Because they're running this automated road analyzer over every roadway, not capturing with their sensors every square inch of the roadway, but on minor roadways making one pass, on bigger roadways making 2 passes, even when there's 4 lanes and 5 lanes. We have done, and if those of you with some longevity will remember in 2015 and 16, a more detailed analysis of the most important roads, the major arterials, using this same kind of equipment, generated similar results. But they're running over the roadway and using their sensors to capture every single within the inspection area, every single crack, every single surface defect, every pothole, every kind of oddball defect that you can find, and it rolls all of that up, identifies it, measures it, categorizes it, assigns a severity to it, and then throws that into a rather large relational database that will then begin doing the analysis of the condition of the pavement according to a state standardized score called the Pavement Condition Index. But the good news is we are, after you run the numbers on all 2,200 miles of roadway, our Pavement Condition Index is a 60.5, which is kind of on the boundary between fair and good. The good news is that this is the chart from the 2017 briefing on pavement condition management that I'd done, and we are exactly where I said we would be 5 years ago. So I'm not exactly sure why the forecast, why we did a forecast with such big bars between 12 million and 18 million. But we've been spending between 12 and 18 million per year for the last 5 years, and that did deliver the expected results. And the pavement condition score is at a 60.5 right now. That, as I said, that's just barely above the boundary between good and fair. And I was joking with the team that maybe we should come up with a new score that's kind of okay, I guess, between good and fair. It's better than fair, but not very good not very deep into the good category. What we do with the database then is run all 2,000 miles of those roadway segments and their current condition using that pavement degradation curve and forecast what the condition of that roadway will be into the future. And we have each of the pavement treatments that are on the top side of that other curve that have costs that are known from our experience, and we forecast out what's the most efficient and most effective way to spend those dollars to come up with the plan that gets us the highest aggregate overall pavement condition index. And that is then matched up with those streets. You're not expected to pinch and zoom on this. This is the 5-year plan. It is a lot of color in a lot of places. But have no fear, there is a zoomable version on the city's website. And as you zoom in, it's easily found on the Public Works Department's main page and on the city's website. Just hover over streets on the left side bar and you'll see the 20-year street maintenance forecast. We do, as you start to zoom in, see the smaller lines with cooler colors. That's years 6 through 20. I'm very confident in the first 5 years of the plan, and we call it the 5-year plan, and that is what the Public Works Department hands off to the engineering department. And we work with the budgeting team to build into the CIP the actual expenditures for those 5 years, and those are recorded in the budget document that you all approve every year. Less confident in years 6 through 20 that we will do those in those years. So they're assigned to a kind of a 5-year bracket in the year 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and 16 to 20, to kind of give a general time frame for when a resident could expect to see some road work being done on their road. Everyone's favorite road and most important road is usually the road they live on. And that's the one they want to know about. So we do.
Does the allocation stay about even for all of the pavement sort of rehabilitation and work that we do every year or every 5 years, or has it been going up or down?
I'm sorry, I've missed the first half of your question.
The allocation, like the general allocation that we give every year in our CIP, is it roughly even?
Roughly even. It moves, and between 12, 13, and 14, back to 12, depending on both the plan and the ability for the engineering department to box those into construction contracts and get them out the door. So we do intend to spend a level amount, but the reality of taking the algorithm's output and then applying engineering judgment to that The algorithm is not smart enough to know that we're going to do a sewer project in a neighborhood, so we'll bump projects in one way, or it will say, it will take one segment, one long block of roadway, and the algorithm will suggest doing 5 different years worth of work on it. We will not want to do that. We'll want to bundle them up into one project and do them maybe in the middle year, not the beginning.
But Jonathan and maybe Scott can jump in.
Mm-hmm.
When you came to us 5 years ago and showed us where we were heading with that draft,
Mm-hmm.
we put significant dollars increase
Yes.
towards this. I think that should.
Yeah. The previous,
Alone.
in the 20, I'm just working from memory here, but I want to say in the 2010, first half of the 2010s, the city was putting about $5 million per year.
Right.
And that's why payment conditions were going down. Unlike solving many of life's most difficult problems that face a city, this is a problem you can solve by throwing money at it. And then that creates a different problem of if you don't have the money, that's a different problem. But things like the first half of the agenda, that's not something that you can solve just by throwing money at it. This, however, is the council has resourced payments appropriately, and I want to give credit to the engineering department and the staff of the Public Works Department. We have done what we said we would do, and we are where we said we would be. So that's the good news.
Jonathan, if I could just add to that, I mean, that was a pretty significant decision by City Council back in 2017, because what they did at that point was decide that they were committed to improving the roadways. And so that took bond issues and a commitment in additional funding at that point in time, and efforts towards a local option sales tax, which did eventually pass. And so the local option sales tax is really the game changer on that funding. But there was a commitment back in 2017 to increase the quality of our roads. And in 5 years, we've shown that that is occurring.
Cheers.
So as we work through our different sets of problems and all of their solutions, I can present you with a map of where we expect to be going forward. The 5 years in the plan now kind of stalls out at that mid-60s range. And if we can get into the middle of that $12 to $18 million a year expenditure range, we'll see a continued upward trajectory. As I said before, my confidence in the out years kind of falls off a little bit. Will we hit 75? I'm not sure. I did come from a community where decades worth of solid pavement management done by my predecessors, also a beneficial climate because it was 6 hours straight south. I enjoyed a pavement condition index average citywide of about 85, and it is possible. It is decades of investment, and it never goes away. So although it is a problem you can solve by throwing money at it, it is a perpetual problem that requires the perpetual application of money. So I can say for the first 5 years that's in the CIP now, I would recommend that we increase our average level of expenditure now is about 12 million. It fluctuates what's approved now between 12 and 13. But as we get closer to 14 in the 5 year, into the out years of the 5 year plan and beyond, you'll see a continued upward trajectory in that pavement condition.
So what I'm seeing, just interpreting this graph, is if we stay at that 12, 13 million, around 2028, our quality starts to degrade, versus if we increase closer to that 14, we're going to get up to 80% by 2032.
Yes.
After that point, it starts to degrade a little bit at that input.
This is forecasting, far into the future.
So we're guessing a little bit.
I would want to reserve the right to adjust this in
Fair.
future. We update this every year, although the data is refreshed with a new drive over of all the roadways once only every 4 years. We can run this analysis. It is a forecast, so we are using modeling with that pavement degradation curve that I'd showed before to predict what the condition will be in the future. We can refresh this with new budget scenarios every single budget year and see how that's tracking with our expectations for what kind of condition we'd like to see.
Do we have any forecast on like improvement in pavement technologies that would change sort of these curves as well? Or is that are we kind of just doing the same old thing that we are used to doing?
We are always on the lookout for new things that will do a better job at lower expense, particularly interested in solving problems that don't have good solutions. An example of that is the less than maybe completely sightly surface patches on, you'll see them on MLK Parkway, where we're trying to solve a problem of inadequate drainage under the roadway and saturation of the pavement joints with salts, road salts. We have to use road salts in the wintertime, but that can cause some premature decay at the joints, kind of a powdering of it. And if you cut it out, you've now just created 2 more joints that just makes your problem worse. We've started sealing over that with a special kind of mastic that is new to our toolkit, and it has dramatically decreased the amount of potholes that we have to get to in those joints over the winter. You'll see those on Indianola Avenue as you head south by the ball field, 2nd and 3rd, turning into Indianola. That's a new application of something where we can stop problems from happening that require repeat interventions over the winter. And if I can get a year out of it, it's great. Some of the application has been on the ground for 2, now coming up on its 3rd year. So that's a pothole that I don't have to come back to, sometimes 6 times per season.
And a road that you don't have to remill necessarily right away.
Right.
Awesome. Thank you.
So Jonathan, as far as planning, is there a point where we'll have taken care of most of our stormwater issues and therefore we could reallocate dollars spent on stormwater toward streets?
I have bad news about that.
No, that's not good either. I heard.
We are in the finishing stages of the stormwater master plan, and there's a lot to do there.
Sorry I asked that question.
And just for clarification, those are 2 different sources of funds as well. So the stormwater fees that people pay would need to stick to stormwater improvements.
And so as we increase, if you go back a slide to the 14 million, we always hear the argument that we can't, engineering's not able to keep up. We can't get out and do that. Do you see that as a potential issue, or as we increase that, are we confident that
This is a modest enough, all I'm showing here is that, we could model more expenditures up. The team down the hallway runs out of capability. I'm not advocating a doubling, which would be a big deal. This is a very modest increase.
And so, Scott, as I ask you, is our sales tax able to support extra dollars into this category going forward?
Yes, there will be some sales tax available. We'll need to have that conversation in this budget cycle about whether this is where you want to put it. Understand that just the time value of money, we're losing that battle as well with inflation. So we absolutely need to put more funds just to get the same expectation of work done, knowing that it's going to cost us more, especially over the next 12 months. So there's several challenges with that budget cycle that we're going to need to talk through.
Okay.
But this would be one option.
Is that potential decrease due to just the value of money decreasing? So if we stay at 14 million over an extended period of time, or is it that you just need to put a little bit more as you go on?
This is not sophisticated budgeting forecasting software.
Okay. I'll stop asking about 2032.
Like I said, in the out years, it's kind of
This
dicey.
doesn't include the record inflation?
We do put discounting and inflation in there, but not so much on the revenue side. So it's a little artificial on the especially in the out years.
And I want to recognize Sarah Teese here as our streets administrator. Her focus or her mind might be thinking around snow removal here at this point, but she does a fabulous job with our streets. And thank you, Sarah, for your work.
Don't mention it.
Do you have the breakdown? I know you gave us sort of an aggregate number in terms of that 60.5.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the past we've seen numbers that show, what percent of our roads are excellent, good.
Oh, yeah, we can furnish that as a follow-up.
I'd be curious to see, because I sort of recall where we were in that 2017,
Pretty low.
2018. Right. I mean, I think we had like 22% in good or excellent 5 or 6 years ago. So, if even that. Right. So I'd be curious to see where we're at by that metric as
Sure,
well.
Yeah, I'd love to see those 2017 numbers compared to now as well.
2017 numbers?
Yeah.
Great. Any other, council, any other questions?
Good job.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
4:45.
4:45?
We do not have a closed session this afternoon, so 4:45 is the time, but I did want to let council know we're going to have an early closed session on the 21st, starting at 3 p.m.
Some